Добрый день.
Good afternoon.
Меня зовут Ширяев Игорь, старший
My
специалист
name is Igor Shiryaev, the chief expert of the department. I'm lead threat research specialist, TI department from Positive Technologies. With my colleague, we will speak about the Cobalt and the new tools that they use and how they develop their tools over the last couple of years. This group is one of the most active in the Russian Federation over the last 18 months, 2 years. We've discovered more than 20 incidents where the ex-Cobalt group has been involved. So I wouldn't say that they became less active. They keep on attacking. So by the time the reporting time comes, I don't think this trend will change. It's an old group, and I've been in existence for quite a long time. Our company has been tracking them since December 2014, when the first report was published. And you can see our research here on the slide, so you can see that they keep on modifying their tactics, they keep on developing the tools, changing the targets and growing. Just like we see the political and economic situation change. We would like to take a look at a few tools that we see in each and every case where they get involved. They don't change, they keep on occurring and reoccurring in every case, but the guys use them and they don't kick their habits. First of all, it's the tunneling tool, G-socket, RefSox. The colleagues mentioned that. We also told you about them. So quickly, I should say that these are the standard tools that are available at GitHub. They don't obfuscate them, they don't hide them. They can run them in the browser on the infected machines and use them quite successfully. Although they have been mentioned for a number of months already, we keep on seeing them running. To destroy and encrypt the infrastructure, Babuk and Logbit ransomware are used based upon Linux and Windows. Babuk is mainly launched in encryption of virtual machines on servers. Here's an example of a script that they use, which shuts down the virtual machine and starts encryption. Babuk is used on Windows-based servers, on user machines. And it works, although it's detected by antivirus software, and everybody knows about these tools, maybe due to the lack of monitoring, maybe due to the lack of these instruments on SXI servers. It works and it's detected. Very often we have this destruction infrastructure which goes not according to the plan. For example, a binary runs in the wrong way, or virtual machines shut down not on time. So we can not always stop these activity, and we can still restore the damaged virtual machine, virtual disk. For example, here's the Hyper-V machine, which has been successfully restored after it had been encrypted by the notorious RStudio, or famous RStudio, whatever you say. So sometimes we cannot restore all of the files, but we have the logs of the Windows, all of the artifacts we'll need for investigation, like system files, sufficient data to track them down. Also, the guys use the main Cobalt tool, which is the obfuscated backdoor, heavily obfuscated backdoor, which they use case after case. It's a well-known tool, and we wrote a very interesting article about it on the Hacker website. Please use the link to check it out. We wrote about how to take this binary, take the payload, take this server and analyze it, controlling server. So we very often see this tool, and so we had to write a bit of a code to automate this process. It's a popular solution which keeps on running, and it's detected very easily. But what are the new things that we have seen over the last time? First of all, we see that the hackers actually changed the initial access tactics. First of all, they used the public vulnerabilities or phishing, but in the recent cases we see that they simply check the infrastructure by having the access rights, VPN or RDP if RDP is open, and then they follow with their other activities. For example, they found these accounts somewhere, maybe the data had been leaked, or previously they found some files of the companies that had been exploited, and they've been kept in the system for more than a month, sometimes for a couple of months or 3 months, and the logs are rotated over the time. The most popular ones that everyone is searching for data, like system, security, whatever, and you analyze the less typical sources like RDP cache and the user access logs, etc. With this particular example, in one of the cached RDP connection data, we can see the hackers use Mimikat, ReefSox, and other well-known tools which work excellently and keep on working. So in order to get to other systems, Telegram has been attacked quite heavily. It's not a new tactic, but for this particular group of hackers, this method has become much more relevant, because in each and every artifact, in every case, we see the data access. The first thing that they do on the machine is that they acquire this catalog, they archive this catalog and take it away, and they need it to brute force a password for this session. But if there is no password, it becomes even simpler to check the sessions of the infected user. So in order to protect it, you need to set a very complex local password and all of the sessions of the Telegram messenger running on other machines. If you suspect that Telegram has been compromised, do this in the first place. And I'm going to run you a quick demo. So this is how it works. With a very simple script for the John Deleter, they brute force the password just in mere seconds, and they can steal your session. They can take over. It was mentioned a couple of years ago and 12 months ago. It works. You brute force the password, and the hacker breaks into your account. And the account owner sometimes can not even see that there's been a new session initiated and his data has been compromised. So we recommend that you end all of the active sessions running. So you just keep it on your phone and restart it on all of the other devices. Another utility, which is a very simple, used here to steal the data, it's called Zen All Passwords Pro. It can take all of the passwords from email clients, from browsers, FTP, etc. And hackers use a very simple script which allows you to roll it out on the infrastructure. It's rolled out on the infrastructure. They collect the report HTML file and they put it on on a shared folder without actually trying to encrypt this. In one of the folders, we have this report HTML available. So what else is interesting? Here we have this stealer, which would be modified every once in a while. It's just for stealing the data from Microsoft Exchange servers. It's one of the cases we've investigated recently. During the course of the monitoring of the infrastructure, they see the following. A user checks in, a legitimate user is utilizing the VPN and they use the RDS server. After a while and after a certain time, which would always be random, they would just go back to the hacker server from which they control this. So we figured it out that there is Microsoft Exchange running with the web access on it, running on it. So the user would get the authentication on this server and they go and check their email, and we checked the logs on the server and we saw quite a suspicious user session. There would always be just one user, but then overnight another user had connected, which had been compromised, and during the session he just checked one folder containing the scripts of the Outlook web access. We also checked this folder and we noticed that one of the files, which is called flogon.js, would not definitely be the one time-wise, and they created a separate copy. Why? We compare these files and we see that one of the files has been modified, and with the quick login function. The quick login is responsible for the user authentication. A few components had been added. The variable with the web server address where the login and password stolen would be sent, and that's called const params line, the string rather, and this function which was responsible for sending the data. This was embedded in the flogon.js, and without any problem they would send those data packets with this data, and we could also monitor that from outside. Here is the packet which was sent to the malicious server. They would misappropriate this from the access log. They would take it from there. We wrote about it in our Telegram channel. You can check it out. Subscribe and check it out if you like. Another tool which is relatively new, which we didn't see, it's called Shell. Shell is actually running inside the 1C solution, Adin-S. We detected that in one of the infected machines with a link leading to GitHub, and we saw that 1C shell. After studying this one file more in depth, after we drilled down, we saw what the hackers used. This shell is detected by the antiviral software. It's not a new one. It dates back a few years already, but we didn't see it previously. So we saw that during the investigation. It is a normal shell. There's nothing extraordinary, but of course it was inside the 1C software. It would run under the user in the 1C software, and they were standard shell code commands, right, like give access, add access rights, privileges, etc. Another interesting tool, which is a new one and an interesting one, is a puma toolkit. We detected that in a non-conventional way because it was hidden quite well in the system, and we analyzed that by timestamps analysis. We use our own data collection tool. It is called PT Dumper. We spoke about it a number of times. When we collect the data, it sets up a file that contains a list of all of the files on the file system. It's called listing, which allows to analyze the catalogs for the files that are significantly different as far as the time is concerned when they were created. On the screenshot you see that there's a standard Linux-based catalog where some files had been created a long time ago when the operating system was created, and some of them are rather fresh. We analyzed the files, and more in-depth look shows that the cron file looks very much different from a standard one. It's 20 times bigger size-wise, so obviously there is something wrong going on. So we found very suspicious information there.
You can see it on the screenshot. There are some keys there, and we decided to take a closer look. And then my colleague Stas will tell you more about this process, how we studied it. Thank you. Puma is a complex malware that includes the functionality of a rootkit, of backdoor, and stealer at the same time. The key goal of Puma is to be stealth in the system and to steal the data and lateral move of objects in the system. Puma has 4 components. First, dropper, uploader, core modules, that is a rootkit, the rootkit itself, and the backdoor. Then we will consider interaction of these components and the way they start each other. The first one starts is dropper. It is disguised to one of utilities, cron utility. It includes the legitimate utility and also the uploader of the rootkit. Also, it avoids recording to the drive. It uses an anonymous file descriptor in order to write it to the member of the descriptor. It starts the legitimate utility. This way, the utility keeps on operating and it remains stealth, secure in the system. Then the rootkit gets launched. So the purpose of the uploader is to check compatibility of the current version of the core of the system with the version of the core for which the rootkit was compiled. In order to do that, it checks whether the CTR wood is on. In case if it's on, then it completes its work. If not, then it verifies the version of the core, and in case if it's in line with the rootkit version, then it creates a script in the file system, then it deletes the script. The script unpacks the core, and then it verifies the control amounts of the core, and in case they're in line with the ones that the rootkit was compiled with, in this case, it starts it. It launches this as the model of the core. Rootkit, at the start, gathers information about the system. One of its functions is to hide filers, directories related to this malware, also processes, and any communications and connections related to malware. This rootkit is peculiar because it has its own command system, with the help of which it's managed by backdoor. Well, in order to do that, backdoor retrieves
RMDIR с специально составленным именем файла, который начинается с слова «заря», написано латиницей, и затем rootkit обрабатывает данную команду и возвращает управление оригинальному системному вызову RMDIR. Соответственно, вы можете видеть, что при помощи
the backdoor is launched
LD preload,
with LD preload,
он отстукивается на сервер
and
и ожидает.
It gives response to the criminal server and waits the command. On top of that, the rootkit has a functionality of a stealer. It gathers different credentials. It's looking for output of utilities or in the input of utilities. It's looking for such rows as password, passphrase, so on and so forth. This way, it's gathering any credentials that the users are typing in. Also, it collects this data from those files that get open. It gathers some keys in the format of PM. I wanted to note that on top of Puma, Cobalt also often use Icefish. In terms of functionality, it's very similar to Puma. And there's a question, why would they need two very similar tools? at the same time, we observe the situation when in the same infrastructure, they would use both Facefish and Puma. In order to do that, I would like to track the evolution of Puma. You can see it on this slide. It compares three tools: Facefish, Kitsune, which is the initial version of Puma, and PumaKit. In March of 2024, initially it was detected by elastic security experts. As you can see, the functionality is quite similar. They're aimed at theft of credentials of SSH users, as collects information about the system. It performs random commands and reverse shell. Then let's consider. Let's have a look when they appeared and what are the similarities. The first one that was detected is Facefish. It was detected for the first time in February 2024. Then in February 2022, Kitsune was detected. And in March 2024, as I said, PumaKit was detected for the first time, or Billy Puma. You can see that the first two tools, Facefish and Kitsune, they are rootkit of the user level, and Puma is a rootkit of core level or nuclear level. In terms of the components, you can see on this slide, Facefish contains a dropper, which is installed in the system, rootkit with backdoor and stealer systems. Kitsune doesn't have a dropper. Criminals install it into another system to output. Puma has 4 components, and it's because it's a more complicated malware. Also, it's worth mentioning that the way they persist in the system is similar in Facefish and Kitsune, but the only difference is that they're using different files for persistence in the system. Facefish uses libs.so, but Kitsune uses rootkit into libclinux.so, as it was done in open source rootkit Azazel. Puma uses a substitute legitimate service to persist in the software. The way of activation, how is it activated? Facefish and Kitsune have the same mode of action. They retrieve bind functions in SSHD process, but Puma is on a different mechanism, and it's using just a regular substitution of the utility, and it's launched by the operating system. As to the differences, Facefish uses its own protocol, its own format of packages. Meanwhile, Kitsune and Puma are using binary JSON in order to hand over the data, or to transfer the data between malware and the server, between the processing unit. Also, configuration is different. Configuration management is different. Facefish configuration is stored in the tail of the dropper, then it includes it into the rootkit file, but Kitsune is using a separate file for this. As to Puma, in order to store the configuration, they use a separate L section, and we also have seen different versions that use Zoflogs file to store Zofconfig for configuration storage. Also, Facefish doesn't have the stealth mechanisms. The only thing is that dropper wipes its tracks in the system. Kitsune has a mechanism, has a stealth mechanism. It's hiding its records to the file ld reload. And also on the level of the user, it conceals files, conceals directories, conceals processes and network connections that are connected with Kitsune. In Puma, they introduced a full-scale functionality of stealth mode on the level of the nuclear level of files, directories, files and processes, and network connections. Here we can see we have analyzed a lot of samples, both with Kitsune and PumaKit, and we can see that indeed they have a lot of similarities. We believe that Puma is just the next version from Kitsune, and Kitsune from the start is based upon an open source code Azazel. You can see it by those functions that are still utilized both in Kitsune and in Puma. For instance, encryption of rows with a constant 0xFE. At the same time, we can't help noticing that there is a huge similarity between FaceFish and Kitsune. Functional-wise and architecture-wise, in terms of the mode of activation, they are the same, but there are significant differences in terms of the communication protocol, for instance. What does FaceFish have to do with this? On this slide, you can see, on the right-hand side, you can see, on the left-hand side, you can see the structure of the package. It's typical of the Asian origin malwares. In the first 2 bytes, we have the length of the package. The next 2 bytes is identifier of the command, and then 4 bytes are taken by control data sum. Also, configuration is typical in FaceFish. It resembles similar to Flag X. Here you can see that on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that all the data are stored with a shift. It's not binary JSON format that is used by Kitsune and Puma, where we can place parameters in any sequence, but here every parameter has its own shift. And the values are put the way they are, but the rows are shifted by the number of rows that we can see in configuration. What does it mean? It means that most likely this tool was not designed by Cobalt. Most likely it has Asian origin, and they could just buy it in the dark web, or they could get it in a leak. In favor of this theory, we can have the following facts. Configuration is stored in the tail of the dropper. Here you can see the tail of UPX file, which is the dropper, and in the tail of it you can see an encrypted configuration. It enables them to change configuration even without having the initial code of this instrument. They just write the tail from scratch, and they can use it with another server. Having analyzed a lot of files, we see a clear pattern beginning from Azazel rootkit, which was taken as a basis. Rootkit Kitsune, and they added backdoor and stealer based on FaceFish. At the same time, Megatsune is an intermediate link between Kitsune and Puma. We see that most of the functionality that is available in Puma is already in Kitsune, but there is no split into two modules in backdoor and rootkit. As the FaceFish, Cobalt started using it earlier, and maybe the functionality was not enough for them, the functionality of FaceFish, and they decided to use it as a basis and to build another tool that would be their own, and it is known as Kitsune, and then we're seeing that it's rapidly developing and getting more and more complicated. Let's have a look at a few technical moments that are quite interesting. They're either interesting or they have not been published yet.
на слайде представлена
For instance, on the slide, you can see configuration of Puma,
различные параметры общения с
different parameters of interaction with the processing unit are integrated here, with the intervals for how long Puma gets connected to one control processing unit and when it switches to the next processing unit. But the most interesting things that have not been described yet is insert
от сертификата
that has hash from the certificate that was used from communication with the managing processing unit, and the parameter SNI. It stands for server need mitigation. It's an extension of TLS protocol, which allows to service a few domains on one IP address with different SSL certificates. In this case, Puma, when it interacts with the managing processing unit, it transmits the domain name that is indicated in the parameters. Just like in all the cases, these were non-existent domain names. In response, processing unit sends the certificate and then is verified with the cache of a third parameter, and then the connection gets established in case if the certificate is right.
Также
Also, ex-Cobalt criminal group often uses this SSL certificate on their servers. It's quite provocative. Here they pretend to be Federal Interior Service, Federal Security Service, FSB. It's quite an interesting and peculiar nuance, because on the one hand, they're trying to hide their certificate that is used for communication with the managing processing unit. Also, they're using these provocative certificates. They're disguising to be employees of Federal Security Service. Since Puma has become much more complicated, and now is the nuclear level rootkit, and it installs its own nuclear level, it took developers to do debugging to understand why Puma does not get launched in the system. Criminals may create co-winder surroundings, and they can use one of the following arguments: extract target in order to retrieve the legitimate utility that it replaces, and extract weapon in order to retrieve the uploader. In order to detect it in the uploader, you need to launch the uploader with three parameters: -f, -v, and -t. Their sequence doesn't matter. You can choose any sequence. On the screen, you can see the output of the debugging, and it's reporting that the nuclear symbols are not in line. It verifies the control amounts, and it shows the control amounts that are not in line. On this slide, you can see a successful debugging. First of all, they retrieve the debugger, they verify compatibility with the core, with the nuclear, and then they launch the uploader, which installs Puma into the system, and then they retrieve the uploader in the mode of debugging, and they report that Puma is uploaded. Another interesting feature is that Puma creates SSH backdoor. In order to do that, in cases when SSHD process reads the file authorized case, it replaces the contents of this file and adds the keys of criminals. It helps criminals to get access to the infected system at any point in time, and they don't need to type in a password. They will keep their access. It will be retained even in case if all passwords on the systems will be changed. They will still keep the access. With this backdoor, we have one interesting revelation, one interesting insight. They are using a very peculiar way of persistence. They persist inside a container of the Docker. We found it by analyzing one of the hosts where the Docker was unfolded in Docker overlay. we found a few malicious files that get attributed, and they're very similar to the components of the Puma rootkit. When we started analyzing this, then we saw that inside this image, somehow with two commands, they copied and launched a file that's called update. The update file was a self-eliminating script. It got uploaded from the control processing unit of criminals. It launched, and then it was hiding. It was hiding in meta-DLD preload, and then it was deleting itself. This way, they got persistent in one of the first layers of the container. Here you can see it. The file got copied, it was executed, and it was run at the first stages. So this malicious malware would get into the container, and they would get launched, and in case if the owner of this software, the legitimate owners of the software, in case if they clone it somehow, or in case if they use it to build some other services, in case if they copy it to other machines, then this malicious software would keep on traveling around the company. It's an interesting technology. We hardly ever come across such a thing, so we described it in detail in one of our posts on our Telegram channel. Please, you're welcome to join our Telegram channel. There's a lot of interesting updates there. Next component that will tell you about this is called octopus.
Octopus представляет собой
Octopus is a multifunctional utility in the command line of Linux. It's coded in Rust language, it's compiled with different optimizations, and it deletes, it erases the debugging symbols. And what's gaining popularity is a malware based on Rust. And it's difficult to analyze these files, particularly in case if the debugging information was deleted, or in case if other tricks were used to make analysis more complicated. In case if you want to know more about how these binaries are analyzed, then I strongly recommend to attend a speech of our colleague tomorrow, Vyacheslav Lunin, at 2 p.m. in Positive Labs track. Octopus itself has the argument row command, and in case if you run it without these arguments, then it will have an interactive mode. Interactive mode is on the slide. Here we retrieve internal documentation of the utility, and what's peculiar, this utility is well documented, including in some commands there is this row which says that criminals are actively using Wiki to document their tools. Since we're seeing a lot of diverse tools that they are coding themselves, we see that they're using Wiki. So we can assume that this is a criminal group that is quite large in size, a lot of people.
Octopus
has a few commands. Some of them relate to persistence in the system and orchestration of the modules that it brings, and some of them are related to upgrading privileges. Glue company modifies binary files. It patches dynamic section in order to attract the dynamic dependence to the module of the binary file. At the same time, the key purpose of this command is launching the positive workload, which is accompanied by this utility, or it can be in the path that is written down as a parameter of this command. The next command is netpatch. First of all, it's designed to unpatch the network services in order to capture their connections and in order to redirect them to the few components. The next command is detect. It's designed in order to detect in the system those components that may be vulnerable to the exploits that this utility brings. The command su retrieves all these exploits, and do command retrieves 4 exploits. It has and vulnerabilities are listed on the slide. Also, these are quite outdated vulnerabilities, quite old ones. Some of them have been seen, we've seen them used in exploits, and they're used by Cobalt. But still, Cobalt are not losing their up-to-datedness.
Octopus несет с собой 4 модуля.
Octopus has 4 modules. It's Mycelium. Mycelium is a backdoor. Also, libzst.so.o. This is a module which gets planted when you when you retrieve the glow command, and the purpose is to track that binaries are still patched. The next model is libsocopt.so.1. It has similar functionality, but it is aimed at intercepting network connections and further redirection of them. The next module is called libsocolk.so.2, and it has an internal name of Mosquito. It's a lightweight backdoor. It can be used instead of Mycelium. Its functionality is much smaller, but in some cases it may be instrumental and may be used instead of Mycelium, for instance, in case if Mycelium cannot work. So Mycelium is one of those mysterious tools that you could see in the articles of our colleagues from Solo when they were writing about web panel of Cobalt. They mentioned Mycelium and they mentioned this picture there. We analyzed this backdoor. It can work not only as a part of Octopus, it can be launched from the command row as a daemon or in a video mode. In case of video mode, it does not even need the rights of a super user. Here you can see internal documentation of this utility on the left-hand side of the slide. On this slide, you can see a more detailed information about how this backdoor can be set up. Backdoor has a lot of commands, including quite standard commands, such as gather information in the system, listing the directories, reception, file recording, random commands. It works as a server. Also, it has quite specific commands, such as obtaining ARP tables, scanning ARP, and sending ARP echo packages, which may prove that this backdoor is more aimed at intelligence in the network exploration. In conclusion, we would like to provide recommendations on how to protect yourselves from these kind of attacks. Please use upload of the operating system in a safe mode, because Puma, in case there is secure mode, then it will not get uploaded to the system. It will not get planted. Also, please do monitor SSH keys, because they can be replaced in the file system in authorized case file, or they can substitute it in the memory the way Puma does it. In this case, detecting it is quite challenging because it's choosing the ASSHD process, and in case of another process, the substitution will not happen. You will not notice the substitution if you open it. Also, we recommend to use the rules for frequently used techniques and frequently used utilities, because criminals often use the things that have been known for a long time, but maybe there is no antivirus or there is no good method of detection of these utilities and tactics, they still manage to succeed in what they're doing. Also, we recommend to use reliable ways of credential storage and to monitor sessions in messengers. It's particularly relevant because in messengers, there could be stored the credentials and some sensitive data. In conclusion, let me mention a few conclusions from our presentation. First of all, as you could see from the presentation, hackers from Cobalt keep on modifying, keep on developing their malware and their tools from some simple things. They start to switch to more complicated ones that are more difficult to detect, that are more difficult to find and to neutralize in order to get planted in the system and get persistent and to steal as much data as possible. It demonstrates that they are changing their goals. And from some activism, from self-PR, they're switching to theft of data, and they are developing long-term and targeted attacks aimed at penetration into as many organizations as possible.
They use trusted relations when they move between the infrastructures using the stolen passwords, accounts, VPN configuration, etc. You just need to monitor it. You need to monitor the passwords of those users who have left the company, check the information sent through messengers, etc. Despite the fact that keep on developing, they keep on using the same simple tools that everybody knows, that have been studied well. And very frequently it replaces the improperly arranged security tools. These are the basic things, and I'm not going to talk about it too much in detail. Anyway, we are done, and here's our information, here's our contact, incident resolvement service, the escalator Telegram channel. That's where we put quite a lot of interesting information that you may find useful. And here is our blog where the threat intelligence colleagues of ours put a lot of interesting information. Thank you very much. And your questions. Okay, guys, thanks very much. It was very interesting. In the end, you said that this particular group of hackers utilizes the so-called permanent tactics and techniques. Could you please show a few more attributes of their tactics that you reveal in the course of the investigation of the activities of this specific hacker group? The attributes are basic. First and foremost, like in the recent cases, they are mainly about pinpointing and other things that can help them pinpoint themselves in this system. They stay there for a longer time. They use very well-known backdoors and tunnels to breach GSocket and Grok, local Tunet, and other ones. They are monitored quite well. There is nothing supernatural there that can be identified, because all these tactics are well known, and they repeat themselves. Mimikatz DC, for instance, all the standard ones. What's different is that they are targeted at the users' credentials and the use of such complex utilities that we mentioned, and that's how we detect them. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Thanks very much for your presentation. Here's a question for you. During your presentation, you said that one of the rootkits was most likely created not by that particular group, but it had been acquired from the Asians, most likely. So would you please elaborate that it definitely shows connections to the Asian groups of hackers? What indicates that these homegrown tools relate to the Chinese group of hackers? Thank you very much for your question. It possibly originates from China because they use the same approach to building the architecture like in other tools, like the protocol, the communication protocol format.
У нас есть указатель на количество байт данных.
One of the indicators is the number of bytes that make the size of the packet, and the ID, the command ID. Very often we use data-related CRC. That is sent further, and it can be in the very beginning or in the very end, and the configuration is very, very relevant to a lot of other Chinese tools when we have the fixed shift to each parameter. So the lines, the strings are shifted, but the actual strings, the lines, follow the set of parameters. So there is a shift. We don't have the exact information where the fish originates from, but we obviously see that they don't grow it, they don't develop it, and they don't create any add-ons to it. So they started growing their own tool, which looks very much like fish, and then it started developing it like a kernel-based rootkit. Hope this answers your question. Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Hello. You gave us a few examples that the SXI server had been compromised. Would you please clarify so that you share your experience in how such appliance service where it's difficult to launch monitoring tools, how we can compensate that? What would be other mitigating measures should we take just to eradicate that and avoid this from happening in the first place? Judging from the previous experience, first and foremost, you need to strictly control the access to the system. The SX servers should have very stringent access rights. Those people who had acquired those scripts most likely never ever used anything unusual. So at one of the machines they found the user credentials, they used the credentials and launched the scripts. So first and foremost, it's the inappropriate access to the servers. It was not tuned up properly, so all of the accounts, all of the account data, all of the credentials were stored in the browser. So people just unlocked the door with their home keys, I mean the hackers. There was no significant difference in user access rights. So even a non-admin user may have rights to access to such significant things. So you need to be able to control the user accounts and the accessibility of the servers from every possible machine. So that's what you need to tackle in the first place. Thanks. Hello, thanks for your questions. Here's a question for you. How can we actually detect the use of puma? It's a hidden tool which runs on the kernel level, and it hides the sessions, the network connections. What are the symptoms to detect it? We did detect it based upon the timestamps change. We analyze the structure of the catalogs and folders, and very often we detect how they replace the system files, and we can analyze it and detect it with the timestamps analysis. Of course, there is no specific tool which would point out the exact changes in a certain file, but using a combination of such ways, you can significantly reduce the number of files for manual analysis, and by manually working with these files, you can find something suspicious, and then you reverse.
Файловую систему с не всегда там включенных или каких-то машин.
Some of the machines are not always on, and we take more detailed information about the file system. Correct me if I'm wrong. We are talking more about the follow-up phase of the investigation of the incident, but I was asking about the monitoring phase, which is the previous one. As for monitoring, you can track down the changes in the catalogs, I guess. And again, the pinpoint tools, MD-SOP preload, whatever it's called, should not show you any red flags, and we've always found them. We'd always find the changes in the file. The file has been updated, and we do the monitoring all the time, and we do this investigation when everything has already happened. So basically, just control the integrity and the secure boot. Yes, thank you. Here's a quick question. The incidents were analyzed very much in detail, but could you please speak up? How does the group enter the system? How do they breach? Group phishing, what do they use? First of all, they misappropriate the user account from the password storage apps, from messengers, because the recent incidents reveal that, because they use the known credentials. For instance, they misappropriate and they steal it through proxy shell and some public vulnerabilities. And they can put these stealers to steal the passwords, they copy the passwords, they wait for a few months, and then they simply log in with the credentials that had stolen previously. So definitely this trend still remains with stolen passwords. That's what I mean. Thanks. Thank you. There's a question regarding the SSHD control. Will that the system indicate the Puma's activity? Well, Puma is checking the name of the process, and you can use the change the name to SSHD, and we will see the changed file in the end. Okay, one more question, and thank you very much for your presentation. It was interesting. Would you please tell us that the standard C Linux AppArmor tools be useful here? Does it protect you from such malware? You just need to initiate a secure boot in Linux, and Puma will not run, so Puma will not be able to install rootkit as a module. It will not save you from simpler rootkits on the user level, but it's be far easier to detect. So if the rootkit is there, it won't help. Basically, we posted that on the escalator chat. So the rootkit commands could be used instead, just to detect it in the system. A lot of rootkits can contain similar vulnerabilities. when the developers didn't think that somebody can have this system prompt remotely.
Выбрать вопрос.
Stanislav, please select the best question. I think the fourth question was the best one, was the most, XPXI server oriented on how to protect those servers. That was the question. I think that was the best question, so would you please come up on stage
Все, спасибо.
to get the prize? Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.